Three women stood by the ocean looking at the same sunrise. One woman saw the physical beauty and enjoyed the sunrise just as it was. This woman was, like 80% of the world, a person who deals with what she can see, feel, touch, move, and fix. This was enough reality for her. She didn't have interest in larger ideas, intuition, or the grand scheme of things. She saw with her first eye, and all was good. Now, a second woman saw the sunrise. She enjoyed all the beauty the first woman did. She was a lover of intellect, technology, and science. She also enjoyed her ability to make sense of the universe and to explain what she had discovered. She thought about the cyclical rotation of the planets and stars, and through imagination, intuition, and reason, she saw with her second eye. And now there was a third woman who saw the sunrise, and knowing and enjoying all the things that the first and second woman did, she had the ability to progress from seeing, explaining, and feeling the physical, while also remaining in awe before an underlying mystery, a coherence and a spaciousness that connected her to everything else. She used her third eye, which enables us to see life as a mystic. So we're in our 6th week of our series based on Richard Rohr's book, The Naked Now. And we're talking today about what it means to be a mystic. What does it look like to be a mystic? Now, I don't know about you, but I used to think that mystics were kind of out there, right? That they weren't really real, right? I thought mystics were people who had a crystal ball, maybe a Ouija board. And they were what I would call, in a not so kind way, woo-woo. You heard that term? Woo-woo? Unity is sometimes called woo-woo, not for nothing. And in those years, in my infancy of coming along on the spiritual path, if someone would have told me that they were seeing something with their third eye, I would have scoffed. I would have rolled my eyes, probably laughed a bit. You too, maybe? No. Good news is that I've grown in my willingness to expand my limited sphere of knowledge. And I've come to terms with the fact that the very nature of God, the very life, the very energy, the very vibration is to be celebrated. It's a mystery to be celebrated. And I have opened myself to the mystical path. So a mystic, Richard Rohr says, is somebody who has direct experience of God, right? Direct and first-hand knowledge, immediate experience of the divine. And that's what we've been exploring for the 6 weeks. Have you ever driven somewhere in your car and after you arrived, you didn't remember getting there? You didn't remember the turns or the lights or the stop signs? Not just me, right? Yeah. We call it automatic pilot, right? We were on automatic pilot. And how many of us have ever made a decision, right, unconsciously and gotten down the road a piece in that decision making and said, what am I doing here? How did I get here? Right? We go on a train of thought, right? We get in this rut in our mind and we make unconscious decisions and we go and we go and go and all of a sudden we say, oh, what's going on here? Right? Because we've lived it unconsciously, not realizing where we would end up. Those are two experiences of not being awake. And we experience this in our spiritual life as well. I certainly experienced it in my spiritual life. We go on automatic pilot in our spiritual life, right? We come to church, we read the books, we learn the principles, and then somehow they kind of just fall by the wayside. And we go back on automatic. We go back on that subconscious, that the things that happened to us, the things that formed us in our lives, and we just kind of fall back into that rut of unconsciousness. All right, we'll let that be a word. So, and we're not awake, right? We're not awake. So, in truth, and I'm going to ask for about 4 or 5 responses here. What does it mean to be awake? Raise your hand if you would. What does it mean to be awake? Pat?
Be in the now.
Be in the now.
Mindful.
Being mindful. What else? To be aware. What else? Elisa? Say again? Present. Wow, you're good students. Because yes, that's all of what that means. And yet sometimes we don't know what to do, how to get there, right? We all want to be there. I know I want to be there. I want to be awake and present in every single moment, but we don't really know how to get there. So being awake is all of that, is being present, and it's also seeing with the third eye, right? If you're a chakra person, you know that the third eye is right here in the middle of the forehead between your two physical eyes. And in the world of chakra, the teaching is to open that eye, right? To whatever energy work, whatever vibration, and to open that eye and see as the mystics see, right? The third eye. We're getting very woo-woo today. So you'll notice that when I end, maybe you have noticed already, when I end our Sunday service, I usually do this. And for me, that's a symbol of seeing with my third eye, of opening my third eye and thanking God, thanking you. And it helps me to remember that there is only one of us, really, in the mind of God. You know, when we talk about the soul, right? How many really have a good idea of what the soul is? Right? The soul, oh, somebody does. The soul, Jack Kornfield says, the American Buddhist says, the soul is our true self. He says, when we look in the mirror, we see that we are aging. We might see a few more wrinkles. We might see a little bit less hair, or a hair that's graying. That's not our true self, right? Our true self is what we have come in with when we didn't have this body. The true self is our consciousness. It's our knowing of who we truly are in the world. It's of really knowing what our divinity is. This is our soul. Right? This is our soul. So when we activate the third eye, we're activating all of that. Our soul, our oneness. And we're remembering who we truly are at depth. So seeing with the third eye is seeing with the complete awareness on a moment-to-moment basis our oneness in God and our oneness in each other. It's what Richard Rohr calls the naked now, right? Being open and non-resistant to life, being open and non-resistant to each other. Most religions on the planet urge us to wake up. Yes, they urge us to wake up. Jesus, the Buddha, Hindu sages, they tell us to be alive, alert, and awake. And that's what seeing with the third eye is, to be awake. To be awake to who we truly are and to who and what everybody else is. Richard Rohr says being awake means dropping to the level that is deeper than what is happening out here, than what is happening on the physical plane. What deeper than that? Being awake means you become a witness to that drama. You watch yourself compassionately from that level, with a little distance. And there's a tool for that. There's a tool for becoming the witness, to watching ourselves dispassionately and detaching from the drama outside of us. And science, researchers found that this is to be true, that to talk about ourselves in the third person. So, they found that people, and I'll demonstrate that in a moment, researchers found that people create distance between themselves and what is causing negative emotions like fear or anxiety when they talk to themselves in the third person. So it looks like for me, if I'm experiencing something that's a challenge, let's just say I'm on a plane and all of a sudden I get really nervous that the plane's going to crash, right? And I feel that fear or anxiety. And so what it looks like is I would step out of the first person and say, oh, look at Jude. She's feeling a little fear and anxiety right now, right? And that, simply that, detaches us from being anchored in that feeling and in that emotion, and we get relief from that. Because what happens, and what happens for me when I do that, is I'm activating the witness. I'm going to go to a slide that I'm not really ready to go to yet, but I'm going to it anyway. So here's what it is. It's like the witness, right? So there's me on the plane, and then there's the person or event. I'm afraid the plane's going to crash. Now, I'm attached to that. I'm going back and forth between me and the person or the event. When I talk to myself in the third person, I'm activating the witness. Now, science says it's like you're viewing it from an outer perspective. I want to modify that a little bit. We're viewing it from a higher perspective. We're viewing it with the eyes of God, if you will. We're viewing it with the third eye. if you will. Oh, look, Jude's a little nervous now. That plane's shaking, and she's a little nervous. And that, just the act of doing that settles us down and removes us from being stuck in that feeling or that anxiety. The researchers say when you put something in the first person, there's a heavier emotional load. I'm feeling this. I'm upset. I'm angry. I'm resentful. I'm afraid. That makes it more difficult to reason about the problem. You know, it's like when you talk to a friend, yeah? And the friend is telling you about an issue and you say, you know, this is what I see from the outside. I see that maybe if you made this little change, or I see this happening, right? You're a lot more objective. And when we put ourselves in the third person, we do the same thing for ourselves. A mystic, this is what a mystic does. We no longer identify with our emotional noise. We can see that it's happening, and we don't have to own it. It looks like this. I'm having a feeling. I am not this feeling. I'm having a feeling of fear. I'm not fear, just having a feeling. This too shall pass. This too shall pass. When we do that, when we can detach ourselves and step out of the me, the person, event, and rise up and see with the third eye, see from Spirit's eye, we quiet the thinking mind. And we relax into just being here now. We relax into presence right here and right now. Richard Rohr calls it collapsing in the pure consciousness of nothing in particular. He says you don't get there, you fall there. So there's no effort needed to get there other than to be present, to become awake to when we're outside of our body or when we're attaching to something outside of ourselves and become aware of that. And then to activate our third eye and raise our vision, rise up in our vision. Mystics recognize, he says, that we are participating in something larger than what is going on right here. We're participating in the mystery. Unity, we would call that we're participating in the Christ consciousness. Right? How many times in your life has something been bothering you or you've been facing a challenge and then you sit in prayer and meditation and you connect with the oneness, you connect with divinity and you come out and you're more relaxed about it. Right? Not just me, right? And you get a sense that all is well despite what's going on in the outer. This too shall pass. So this perspective allows us to see things for what they are and for what they're not. So we begin to enjoy our lives and other people from the perspective of detachment, right? From this perspective, not from their perspective of how useful they are to you or how important they are to you. We enjoy people just for who they are, just for who they are. Now, this doesn't mean that living in the present and seeing with the eyes of a mystic, it doesn't mean that we don't work towards changing things in our lives. But we do it without attachment. We do it without anxiety or without fear. Now, I know that I'm saying this, that this is the human condition. But what we are called to do as students of truth and students on the path, spiritual warriors, whatever we call it, is to become aware of this and to make choices in our lives, to make choices to change the way we think about things. We make choices to connect with God in all areas of our lives, in all situations in our lives. And the trigger, of course, is when we're feeling something we don't want to feel. Oh, look what Jude's feeling right now. She's feeling a little nervous that this isn't sinking in. And then it's like, okay. Because one person's going to come through the line, as it happens every Sunday, and say, you were speaking to me today. Right? And so that's how we move through our anxiety in life. You stop labeling, ranking, and categorizing people when you see from this vantage point. We step away from judging people when we see with the eyes of the mystic. Right? Now, I don't know about you, but I've been doing this work for a long time and I'm still full of judgment. But I'll tell you what happens now. when I catch myself, which is 99.9% of the time, is I change it, right? I change it, and like if I'll see somebody, let's see, if I see somebody walking on the street that I think that their clothes don't look good on them, and I think, oh, didn't they look in the mirror before they left the house? And the next part, I say, okay, Jude, no, honey, we're not going there. And I send an immediate blessing out. I send an immediate blessing out whenever I find myself judging, right? So that's what we are called to do, is to catch ourselves. I don't think in my life I have judgments, right? I rank, I do all of that stuff. And I catch myself, I change it, and I bless it, right? So that's what we are called to do. And then what happens when we lift up our vision and we become, by the way, Richard Rohr calls this the stable witness. It's always there. All we have to do is become aware of it and to use it. The stable witness is always there. When we are no longer on an emotional roller coaster, right? We're no longer on an emotional roller coaster when we can activate the witness, when we can see with the eyes of spirit, we can say, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Try that the next time somebody's in your face. Oh, that's interesting. For me, the next question that comes behind that is, what can I learn from this? How will this bless me? Right? And then we can go further along into radical forgiveness, which we won't go. We won't go there today. But this is what the mystic does. The mystic uses everything that's in front of them for learning and growth. Everything as a blessing. Everything to become more of a mystic, to activate more of the witness. When we disengage or detach from the event, the challenging event or person, and lift our vision, activate our third eye, we are in union with God. We are in union with divinity itself. We are in union with Christ consciousness. And there's a simple way to get there, simple but not easy for many of us, and it's prayer, it's meditation, and it's contemplation. It's spending time in the silence, which sometimes scares us so much. We don't want to settle down, so then when we settle down and we drop out, we're afraid of what we'll find. Well, I'm here to tell you we find God. We find more peace and more harmony. And it helps us see more with our third eye. It's going within and becoming ever more aware of what our triggers are and what our reactions are. And becoming ever more willing to transform. When the Buddha started to wander around India shortly after his enlightenment, he encountered several men who recognized him to be a very extraordinary being. They asked him, "Are you God?" "No," he said. "Are you a reincarnation of God?" "No," he replied. "Are you a wizard?" they asked. "No." "Well, are you a man?" "No." "So what are you?" they asked, being very perplexed. "I am awake," he said. And so are we. It's available to us in every single moment of our lives to become awake, to stay awake, and to transform our lives, to see with the third eye, and to see as mystics see. May it be true for each and every one of us. Namaste.